Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 25th installment of the Galen Data Medical Device Innovation webinar series. I'll be your host today. My name is Dwayne Mancini. I'm the CEO and Managing Partner at Project MedTech. Today, we'll be hearing from Angela Holmes at Mercury Data Science for a discussion on how data science powers MedTech. Specific topics include the different categories of MedTech diagnostic and therapeutic applications, how MedTech is transforming clinical trials, and what are the key principles to follow if digital health is part of your strategy. First, a few housekeeping items and some information on Galen Data. Galen Data is the cloud for medical device makers. The Galen Cloud provides a configurable platform for device-to-cloud connectivity that is compliant to FDA, HIPAA, and CE mark standards. Built on 40+ years of collective experience developing compliance systems in the medical device industry, the company's goal is to make medical device cloud connectivity available to all at a fraction of the cost while shaving months off the development timeline. I'd now like to welcome our guest, Angela Holmes. Angela is the CEO of Mercury Data Science. At MDS, they build AI solutions for life science and healthcare to support drug discovery, medical devices, digital health, and clinical trials. Their data science team is trained in computational biology, biophysics, neuroscience, and pharmacology. And the clients have been able to advance research and discover digital biomarkers to reduce reliance on subjective endpoints, increase clinical trial participant retention, improve algorithms and diagnosis, and remote monitoring via medical devices, and predict the outcomes of claims. Angela herself is an AI or a strategist with 15+ years of experience working with venture-backed, high-growth and enterprise organizations in healthcare, life sciences, energy, and financial services. She has experience in designing and implementing data and AI-driven solutions, guiding product development priorities, and growing software adoption and revenue. She has held leadership roles in machine learning, driven software companies across sales, product strategy, marketing, and customer service. She holds a Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degree in Mechanical and Biomedical Engineering from Georgia Tech and Johns Hopkins University. With that being said, Angela, the virtual stage is now yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Dwayne, and thanks to the Galen team. I am super excited to talk to you all today about so many things that are happening in the MedTech world. So I am from Mercury Data Science, and thanks for that awesome introduction, Dwayne. You covered well what we do. We bring AI solutions to advance the mission of our clients. We bring expertise from a number of domains, and we speak the language of biology and medicine. We work building solutions here we go, across the full value chain of life sciences and healthcare. So everything from early stage biopharma R&D, building platforms to advance drug development, clinical trials, usually in support of discovering biomarkers, in particular multimodal complex biomarkers. If you don't know what those are, you're going to learn today. We work with MedTech, med devices, and SAMD, and we build production data science platforms. So one of the talking points for this talk was, could MedTech really eclipse biotech? So it's a little bit controversial. I had a call a few weeks ago with some investors and some bankers that suggested this, that they're beginning to see signal that this could happen in the next few years. And of course, my first reaction was, are you new to this industry? Which luckily I didn't say that out loud. They're not new to the industry. They are watching some trends. They are going to put a lot of money behind this thesis. And that really started me thinking, could this happen? And thinking about the work that we do, in particular, serving the biotech and the medtech industries. So before anyone yells at me, this is not in the numbers yet. So this is PitchBook data. On the left, in the navy blue, are MedTech numbers. In the royal blue are biotech numbers. So you can see biotech is taking the majority of VC investments compared to MedTech, and this is through end of last year. So the numbers are smaller this year, but the trends are still holding. And on the right are FDA approvals. So navy blue, MedTech, PMA approvals, and on the right are royal blue, biotech approvals. Biotech is still leading. However, what I would tell you is that MedTech is becoming intertwined with biotech, and biotech is increasingly relying on MedTech. So you can see MedTech taking a stronger role across this full value chain, from discovery to clinical trials, diagnosis, and precision medicine assays, treatments, monitoring, and then tracking, particularly in the consumer health market. So we're going to go through a lot today. We're going to talk through case studies from all of these categories. So first up in discovery. So there's a data science revolution that's continuing in the drug discovery space. The earliest companies were focused around using AI ML models and big data sets to drive drug or molecule design, so a lot of physical modeling. That's still happening. Those are now beginning to show some efficacy, so we're going to talk about that. But the real trend now, so here's a quote from Exscientia CEO that's saying that AI ML is now going to start moving upstream to target identification and downstream to things like patient selection and making clinical trials more successful. So they're also, the use of real world data is coming into discovery in a big way as well. So the first company we were going to look at is In Silico Medicine. They have a thesis that is that AI-assisted systems can identify novel drug targets for untreated diseases. They can assist in development of new treatments and predict how the treatments may perform in clinical trials. So they have done it partially. They've got their AI discovered, it's an AI discovered drug target and an AI discovered drug has entered phase 1 clinical trials for IPF, so a fibrotic disease, pulmonary fibrosis. And they have gotten there from start to phase 1 in 30 months and for a fraction of the cost compared to what pharma typically spends. So they have done it, the proof of concept to link deep learning models to link biology and chemistry in a meaningful workflow. We'll see what they can do with predicting the clinical trial outcome. I'm super anxious to see how this drug does in trials. And then you can see their fundraising reflects the excitement around this work. So is this MedTech? Is it biotech? It's absolutely the drug development industry, but a lot of these techniques, the software world, the digital world has typically been focused in MedTech. So interesting. Vium is another one. They have a digital vivarium. So for animal studies, kind of a theme around the biomarker world is that so much of the assessments we do in both animal models as well as humans in clinical trials, these are blunt instruments. So we're looking at things like how long did the animal survive? And sometimes that's all we can really measure. So it doesn't necessarily inform how a drug is going to do toxicity-wise or efficacy-wise in clinical trials, hence the high failure rates in many indications. So Vium is bringing a digitally connected approach. This vivarium, this animal, it's for mice, but they connect cameras, so they monitor the animals 24/7 and connect in biosensors so that you can have more meaningful results on your animals. So how much are they sleeping? How much are they eating, drinking? How much time are they spending being social? You could start doing advanced computer vision things with these cameras around, can you pick up tremors or seizures? So this company was acquired by Recursion last year. So clearly they saw the value in early stage drug development. We've talked to some other preclinical CROs, and this is where the industry is moving. So Vium was first, but expect to see more. Viant Bio. So this sounds like science fiction, but it is true. The world of organoids is progressing, and so this is a company that is using human donor iPSCs, so stem cells, to build 3D models of brains. And so these are real 3D tissues. What is incredible about them is they show a mix of neurons and astrocytes. They oscillate, so they can see neural activity that can be imaged, so you get waveforms. They are able to take donors that have CNS diseases, cultivate those. They're able to do the same for healthy donors, and they can differentiate the wave patterns, the signaling that's happening in healthy versus diseased. So this could be a human-based preclinical drug discovery platform. I mean, that's really how they're going to market. Will it predict? So will you be able to see wave patterns that are disrupted in diseases that then are treated with drugs and in a high throughput screening platform? Will those pan out to healthier EEG patterns in clinical trials? We'll see. But now you're really getting into the world that's historically been MedTech and really bringing that straight into the biotech world. So that's a fascinating one. So then if we move on out of discovery into clinical trials, there's so much happening here. There's a focus in almost everyone we talk to in developing biomarkers, and biomarkers can be molecular based. They can be digital, so looking at the way people show behavior on a video, whether that's indicative of their neuropsychiatric sort of mental state, whether you're capturing other kinds of behavior, you can put it together. So you can have self-report surveys, clinical surveys, digital behavior, as well as molecular assays, and develop multimodal complex biomarkers. But this is really needed to be able to stratify participants in clinical trials to make sure that you're getting participants that you think are going to be the best responders to your treatment. It also can give us more quantifiable measures of outcomes. So instead of the subjectivity that's often used, where you have very skilled and experienced providers, but nonetheless humans that are sort of saying, yep, looks better, looks worse, I'm going to grade that as a stage 2. Now we can start bringing in algorithms that can bring much more consistency and larger scale across populations. And then of course the decentralized clinical trials trend really was accelerated during the pandemic. And so that's really driving the use of wearables, apps, and biosensors to replace the clinic. So again, MedTech is solidly coming into the clinical trial space. So one example I want to talk about is a company called Iterative Scopes. So I went through a startup accelerator with them at the Texas Medical Center a few years back, and they were very much focused on the clinic. And this is many MedTech founders. Their vision is to start a company to make a difference in everyday healthcare. So they were focused on, could we develop deep learning, video analytics-based models to bring better insight into identifying malignant polyps during colonoscopies. And so they were showing a lot of success in that, meeting with a lot of hospitals and clinicians to do that work. But where they've actually found their fit initially is in clinical trials. So you see this collaboration with Janssen that's been announced pretty recently, earlier this year. They are going to use Iterative Scopes. Janssen's going to use Iterative Scopes technology to classify and qualify participants for IBD trials. So now you have more objective measures of being admitted to the trial and more objective measures of clinical response to the treatments. So really interesting. And I think they will get to the clinic eventually, but the clinical trial path has been really good for them.
Yeah, Angela, real quick to hop in. I wanted to hop in on the last slide as well, just because I come from the CRO world, so I know how important a lot of this is for the CROs with decentralized clinical trials. But I just wanted to add in real quick to the Iterative Scope product as well. If you look at the bottom there, and you're kind of talking about MedTech, BioTech, and comparing them, the $150 million Series B. We had Jonathan on our MedTech Money series podcast to kind of talk about this, because we all know in the MedTech space, you just don't see a Series B that large in MedTech, but you are starting to see some of these creep up into these really large fundraising rounds. And so anyways, I just wanted to point that out, because that's oftentimes, when people compare biotech to medtech, that's what it is. But you're starting to see some of these medtech companies that are playing in this space having really, really large rounds. But anyways.
Absolutely, Dwayne. That's why I put the numbers on these slides, because these are higher numbers than you're used to seeing in medtech. But that tight collaboration with biotech is really interesting. Okay, this is one that Mercury Data Science works in. So Janssen there's these challenges around bringing more quantitative assessment, development of biomarkers, digital, multimodal is pervasive, especially in precision neuroscience, especially in autism. So there are no approved treatments for the core symptoms of autism spectrum disorder right now. The Janssen neuroscience team is really focused on how can we raise the bar on how we run neuroscience-based clinical trials, and especially in autism. So they have developed the Janssen Autism Knowledge Engine, the JAKE platform. So it is combining biosensors with clinical scales to develop digital biomarkers that can be used for both stratification and outcome. And so the digital biomarkers, all of these sensors that are in yellow at the bottom of the slide, so they're looking at gaze tracking, they're looking at skin galvanic response as a proxy for stress, ECG. It's interesting to see heart rate variability differences in healthy versus ASD populations, facial expressions and emotion analysis there, and EEG. So our team has had the privilege of working with the Janssen team in this space, and the platform we built is something you might see in a more medtech space. So the platform is, of course, cloud deployed. deployed, and when it is crunching through these large clinical trial data sets, it's scaling up to 1,000 CPUs and more than a terabyte of memory. And we are, publications are happening. The Janssen team is really passionate about not just advancing their drug pipeline, but also really helping the overall industry. So they've been pretty open with sharing the insights and the publications around what they're finding that in signal for these biomarkers that are separating these populations. So exciting work there. Okay, next up is we're going to talk about diagnosis. So in diagnostics, there's a big focus on precision medicine. So using biomarkers that can predict response and predict personalized treatment. So we work in this space a lot. And the biomarkers can be discovered kind of at any stage of the work. They can be discovered during preclinical research. So if you're developing a drug that's going to be targeting a specific genetic mutation, clearly you know that biomarker in advance. Sometimes, especially with the behavior biomarkers, you might, or the biosensor based, you might discover those more during clinical trials of who does seem to be responding. We've done some work in this in neuropsychiatric disorders and finding bioprofiles that seem to be better responders. And then also analysis of real world data. You can find populations of super responders versus not, and that can then inform precision medicine assays. So the interesting thing about this discovery work for precision medicine, for biomarker, it requires enormous sets of data, so preclinical data, clinical trial data, and real world that spans, a very heterogeneous data set, so omics, images, path images, other kinds of images, biosensors, and clinical data. So we're seeing the most complex data platforms that have ever existed coming into production now to really power all this discovery. So again, MedTech is absolutely being relied on for all this work. And of course, diagnostics is typically considered the domain of MedTech. So this is a great story that I really like. So Janssen has a drug, Balversa is the trade name, and it targets tumors with particular genomic alterations. And patients with these alterations in advanced bladder cancer showed really good results in the trials. And bladder cancer is the 10th most common cancer worldwide, so this is important. And up to 15% of those with advanced disease have this mutation, so that's a significant percent. However, when they took this drug to market, they realized that the uptake of the drug was lower than expected, and they discovered that unfortunately, a lot of the patients just weren't having the sequencing done. Sequencing of tumors becomes less common, particularly out in the community. And then of those tested, fewer than half received the treatment of those, and they were eligible. And part of the problem is even when sequencing is done, it takes weeks to get the results. The patient has already left the clinic, getting them back, getting the prescriptions written, things were falling apart. So the Janssen neuroscience team developed an AI-powered model, a computer vision model, based on the path slides that could identify these specific mutations. Well, Janssen Neuroscience is not in a place, because of course they're a pharma company, they're not in a place to roll out clinically a computer vision model based on path slides. But guess who is? Page AI is doing exactly that. So they are an AI MedTech company that is rolling out across the country in clinical settings the ability to deploy deep learning models around path slides to accelerate path workflows and improve diagnostic rates. And so now you've got a precision medicine assay that is going to roll out through the Page infrastructure developed by Janssen for Janssen's drug. So really cool to see these partnerships happening. Okay. So treatments, we're moving fast through the entire value chain here. So there's increasingly more apps and devices that are focused on drug-free or drug-augmenting treatments. We're going to talk about a few in these slides. So this is really interesting, and these are big markets that some of these devices are going after. So when you're going after drug-free treatments, you now are in the same realm as the pharma companies, as the biotech. And drug augmenting means you're now part of that treatment life cycle. So valuations could start approaching what you're used to seeing more in biotech. And then the companion apps. So we're hearing a lot around pharma being more and more interested in companion apps because the evidence is absolutely emerging that these companion apps change behavior and they drive medication adherence, they improve outcomes. So a lot of work happening there. So first up example is a company called Twin Health. So they are focused on type 2 diabetes. They have this idea of the whole body digital twin. and they give you what's considered a digital representation of your metabolism, and they gather a lot of data points. So some are from CGMs, continuous glucose monitors, some are self-reported, people are reporting on their nutrition, they're tracking their weight. So there's a lot of digital health apps that are coming on the market. What was kind of caught my attention was they reported clinical trial results that I think it was a couple hundred people in the group, but they showed that 84% of the group stuck with it for 6 months, and they were determined to be in type 2 diabetes remission. That's a remarkable behavior change without drugs. So many of the patients were on metformin, and the ones who were on insulin at the beginning of the study, all of them were off insulin by the end. And the definition of remission in type 2 diabetes is a stable A1C for 2 consecutive months. So this was sustained. So who knows what'll happen after the 6 months of the trial, but really incredible. And the market size, Dwayne, to your point, the type 2 diabetes market is projected to be $58.7 billion by 2025. And this company now has raised $140 million in their Series C, which is really connected into that market. So interesting. Next up, migraine. So the drug companies are, new migraine meds have been coming on the market the last few years. More are in trial. So this is squarely in the targets of pharma. This is a new wearable device that's come on the market. Theronica, actually it hasn't come to market just yet, but it has been 510(k) cleared. And so it's a wireless electrical neuromodulation device for treatment of migraine, and they're actually saying they're focused larger on the pain management industry, which takes them to an even bigger market, but migraine is where they're going first. Also, they're targeting patients that are 12 and up, and so while there's a lot of migraine meds on the market, it's considered an unmet medical need for pediatrics. So the fact that they're cleared for 12 years and up is fantastic, and so you see the fundraise corresponds to that market that they're going after. Do you have a question for me, Dwayne?
I do. It's not from anyone, it's from me. But it brought up pain management. And so I've asked quite a few companies on my podcast that are going after the pain space or things that were generally treated by the pharma industry. I'm wondering, like with you interacting with these companies, are there extra hurdles when you start going after the same space that big pharma is going after? I don't know how much you want to expand on that, but I know when I've asked other entrepreneurs this, they've been pretty blunt and said it is a little bit different. It's a little bit harder. I mean, we're talking about bigger dollars, and that does kind of play a pretty big role in it. So I'm just curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, so a couple of things. We've talked to some of these. The electrical neuromodulation space is having a moment, right? It's really showing some great efficacy in pain. It's showing some great efficacy in neuropsychiatric disorders. And some of these have been on the market for a long time. They go back to maybe the 80s. And some of those, I've met with some of these founders, they claim that although their devices are safe, they were proven efficacious, they sort of got pushed to the side in favor of drug-based treatments. I think part of the reason they're having a moment now is a number of reasons. One is the opioid crisis. We're desperate to find better treatments for pain management that don't have the same addictive properties. We are in a mental health crisis in our country, so anything that is drug-free, that can be fast acting with low or no side effects to the mental health population is huge. But it is hard to show. We need digital biomarkers for pain because it is hard sometimes to show efficacy when it is so subjectively defined. So there's some hurdles, but super opportunities as well, Dwayne. Awesome. Okay, this one, I don't know much about this company, but they popped up with a Series A just earlier this month, Otolith. It is a wearable for vertigo, and it is drug-free, and the participants in the trial claimed that it is immediate, the relief from vertigo. And for some of the participants in their trial, they claimed that it was life-changing. So it's another, drug-free treatment, and you see the vertigo market is 1.76 billion, and so that's a pretty hefty Series A round for them. So, so that seems pretty promising. Next up is the drug companion world. So Boehringer Ingelheim is the largest privately held pharma in the world. They have experimented with a platform called RespiPoints. So for the COPD population that relies on prescription inhalers, medication adherence is really important and has been problematic in the past. So not only for BI's revenue considerations, do they want good medication adherence and timely refills and so forth, but for this population in particular, you need to keep them out of the hospital. And so keeping them on their meds in good adherence is important for overall outcomes. There's a number of digital health platforms focused on the COPD population as well. And so this gamified platform, they rolled it out, and for their patients, they get consumer rewards, so things like Starbucks and Amazon gift cards in exchange for keeping this app updated with daily medication check-ins, taking quizzes and surveys of how they're feeling, and updating the app with prescription refills and so forth. But again, they've run a study, and they reported that the participants, so the ones who are on the platform and using this mobile app, showed a 44% boost in adherence compared to those not using the program. And you can see 2.5 times more likely to stick to a prescribed regimen, and slashed in half the chances of discontinuing the prescription. So the pharma companies are absolutely watching evidence coming out like this. So many of them are now considering how to include more MedTech, how to include more companion apps to keep driving up adherence and improving outcomes. So it's an interesting one. Okay, monitoring. So this is kind of the classic MedTech world. Remote patient monitoring is happening. It's got huge possibilities for offering hospital-based care in a home setting, supporting aging in place, doing all the things, right? Reducing readmissions, reducing ER visits, improving outcomes. And the solutions are complex, right? Biosensors, telehealth, AI ML-driven care protocols, a lot of data science here to start picking up on anomalies and escalation of symptoms and so forth. When's the right time for interventions? So the case study here is around a partnership between Ellipsis Health and Ceres Health. So Ceres Health, they have a platform that you can see in the text here on the slide. It includes digital scales, smart pill dispensers, smartphone apps, wearables, and it helps support medication adherence, weight management, and daily activity levels, and it automatically sends updates to the care teams. What's new here is with Ellipsis coming in, Ellipsis has developed voice-based biomarkers that can detect signs of stress and deteriorating mental health conditions, so symptoms of anxiety and depression. So this monitoring happens through normal use of a smartphone, and also is sort of surveyed through apps. But what really caught my attention is that this is going to focus on the more than 18 million people that are on Medicare with mental health conditions. So these kinds of monitoring platforms are beginning to really be rolled out at large scale. The payers, including CMS, is seeing evidence that these really are keeping people out of the hospital and enabling earlier interventions. And so I think we're going to just see more of this. And of course, data science is woven all into this, as you would expect. Okay, the tracking of health. So this is the consumer market. So wellness is now a $1.5 trillion global market. McKinsey research shows this is what customers are most interested in. So health, fitness, nutrition, appearance, sleep, and mindfulness. And I like this quote from the McKinsey partner of where they think wellness is going to be in 2030. A lot more offerings that let consumers triage issues themselves, only involve a care team when it's really necessary, and this concept of devices that are moving from the clinic or the doctor's office into the home, and interesting pharma products more over the counter and easily accessible. We'll see. So I think this sort of push of MedTech more over to the consumer market is going to continue to drive those bigger valuations, bigger fundraisers, bigger ways to have an impact than maybe the typical MedTech environment that's limited to the clinic. So a company, I don't know if you know their name, Rockley Photonics, but Rockley is the sensor that powers Apple's watch. So they are a publicly traded company, and for many years, Apple was their only customer. They have since branched out. They have their new sensor, their new smartwatch system is coming out soon. It's called BioTech. And they've said they've received the first commercial purchase order, and it could be sold to consumers by end of year. And of course, they've said the purchase order is from an undisclosed global healthcare technology provider. My money's on Apple, but we'll see. But what is crazy here is that they are now able to detect non-invasively blood alcohol content, blood lactate, and glucose levels. So having a non-invasive continuous measure of glucose has been the holy grail in the smartwatch space for a long time. So we'll see. I mean, you start thinking about the amazing apps that could be built on this. It's pretty revolutionary. And it's not yet authorized by the FDA, but I'm sure those studies are going to get started soon. Next up, and one of the last case studies I want to talk through is Dexcom. So I'm sure you all know about the Dexcom CGM system, classic MedTech device. But one thing that's interesting is looking at how they've shifted their market. So this is no surprise to them that things are shifting to consumer. So this is an announcement from earlier this year that last year they got the FDA green light to start pairing their devices with fitness trackers. So things like the Garmin, the Livongo. So now blood sugar data can be taken from their sensors and displayed on smartwatches and on cycling computers. And so as they've shifted more into this fitness health market, over kind of a 7-year period, their market cap went from 3 billion to 50 billion. So, and this was, I think we were working on some of this analysis early this year. So I don't know what their market cap is actually today. Many stocks are down, but still the growth in market cap, the growth and reach of their market has been remarkable by shifting who they're selling to, thinking about how they're driving their integration strategies, their data science strategies, and so forth. So I think that's a good insight for many companies. Okay, so this was a fast run through from the whole life sciences healthcare value chain, starting from discovery all the way to consumer. What are the trends? Some example companies that are really blurring the lines between MedTech and BioTech. Maybe you also agree with these investors that MedTech could eclipse BioTech in the coming years. It'll be super interesting to watch. I don't see any of these trends slowing down personally, so we'll see. And data science is driving all of this innovation. All of it is powered by digital assets and by new insights from the data that humans haven't been able to capture before at scale. Pretty exciting times to be in the space. So I've got a couple takeaways for you, both on the business side and on the data side, that are direct consequences of understanding these macro trends that are happening in the space. So first up is really consider this full value chain. We talked about iterative scopes. You know, it's really common for companies to come to market thinking that they're going to go after the hospital, the clinic-based market. It's a tough one. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but 12 to 18 month sales cycles to get into hospitals, and even once they sign a deal, now you have to wait another year for their IT teams to have capacity to support integrations and so forth. Trying to get a UI that can be integrated to the major EHR vendors is really tough. So think about clinical trials. Could that be a better path for you, a faster path to get your tech used, to collect more data on efficacy, learn more about the space? This might be a better path for you. The consumer market as well. The consumer market is huge. The demand for people on the wellness side of the spectrum to prevent, to monitor, to track, avoid disease, and improve health is increasing every year. So maybe you go a direct-to-consumer route rather than the typical clinic route you've been planning. But I would give that some thought. Moving down on the business model, one of the things that I hear investors talking about is that pharma has a recurring revenue model built in, right? You get your refills, and they're designing these companion apps to keep the refills going on time. Could MedTech start shifting into a recurring revenue model? So if you think about the migraine device, and I don't know Theranica at all, I've had no discussions with them to be very clear, but if you think about that device, not everyone is going to respond to that device. Not hopefully a high percentage will, but some will. It will not prevent migraines or not treat them. perhaps they can figure out a way where you, instead of paying the full cost of the device up front, there is some more moderate pricing that is paid monthly or paid based on number of uses, and then you refill it in the same way. And so for consumers, for health payers, you sort of lower the risk, you lower the upfront cost, and it's more tied to long-term use, compliance, and efficacy, more like what they're used to in the pharma model. So think about that. That now that things are connected, the Bluetooth connectivity with mobile apps and so forth, it gives you new ways to sell, sort of charging by the use of things that you never had before in the medtech world. So the technology is going to drive new use cases. The future is digital. So I think everyone knows this, but hopefully all these examples today have convinced you, if you were still on the fence, your data assets, your digital assets are valuable. They are indeed assets. Treat them as such. Capture and preserve all of your data. I would recommend preserving it in the most raw format that you can, because there's always new techniques for pre-processing, cleaning, extrapolating missing or sparse information. So keep all of it, track the provenance, know where you got it. As it gets modified, keep it under version control, but really make sure you don't lose this data. I've heard a lot of stories, unfortunately, of just clinical trial data in particular just being lost. Consider data rights. So we've talked to a number of device companies that are either they're on the market or they're working in clinical trials. They're doing integration work, so they're handing over the feeds from their devices over to some other company, maybe a digital health app or something else that is consuming that signal, and then that digital health app is really the one that owns the user experience and is tracking the outcomes and so forth. Try to negotiate data rights for yourself, because you need to know the outcomes for your own devices. You need to have access to all that rich data set so that you can drive your own modeling strategies, analytics, algorithms, etc. So think about that. One comment I'll make there, I've seen, so rolling back the clock a few years ago, I saw Iterscopes and others, the ones who were really collaborative and said, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats, and took the attitude of, we're going to get data rights and we're going to give up something in exchange. We're going to have a value exchange. We're going to exchange, you know, royalties or whatever on our product in order to get not just data rights, but to get access to experts and collaborators. They are the ones that I'm talking about today. They are the ones that have moved forward, have moved to the big funding rounds. The ones that were more of the hoarding, we're going to keep ownership of this company, we're not going to give up anything, people should just give us their data for free. Those are the ones we're not talking about today, because they've not moved forward. So really think about how you can play in this ecosystem. And then the bottom right, arrive at your destination, you need a roadmap. So AI/ML is a whole set of tools, many tools that can do amazing things, but at the end of the day, they are tools. So when we hear about data science projects that fail, and there's a lot of them out there, often it's because there's, you know, a company says, we need digital innovation, let's hire some data scientists. Okay, data scientists do some amazing things. That is not a recipe for success. You need to be clear on how can you use these tools to really advance your mission. Have a business plan, have a roadmap, just like you would for any other investment that your company is making. We do a lot of partnership in this area. And then last up are the data takeaways. So life sciences and healthcare data require specialized skills. I don't think I'm surprising anyone on this webinar with this information, but biological and medical data is noisy. It's often incomplete. Humans are humans, right? The data sets often are unstructured, especially if you're pulling in clinical data, self-report surveys. If you're working on app data, looking at behavior patterns, sometimes you need natural language processing to find signal out of this. But just know that there's a lot of techniques that can make messy, incomplete data useful. So don't assume it doesn't have value just because it is in a questionable form in its raw format. The other thing to know about the space is sample sizes are small, right? Clinical trials are so expensive, just like you brought up, Dwayne, in the pain space when MedTech is trying to compete with pharma. If you look at Rock Health has published, and the FDA has now made it available, the number of SAMD companies that have gotten FDA approval around algorithms that are specifically model AI/ML based. As of early this year, it was somewhere around 300, so not huge numbers. But when you look at the data sets, and I'm sure it's grown since then, so I haven't looked at it in the last few months, some of these models have gained approval with 100 or less participants. So you can do a lot with a small sample size, but you need a team that is used to working with smaller sample sizes. But also, these sample sizes are very wide, so the number of attributes known about these patients is enormous, right? When you start getting into sequencing data, images, treatments, procedures, outcomes, all kinds of, plus the signal coming out of the devices themselves, applying treatments. So this is just the exact opposite problem that a data scientist might have seen in the retail or the fintech market, right? Where you have billions, trillions of transactions or observations, but maybe not as, but a data set that's not as wide. So it's a different focus on skills, and your data science team really needs to speak the language of biology and medicine to do what you do. So that ties straight into the next one. Don't silo your data science team. Your data scientists really need to understand your mission and how their work can bring value. I would say here, especially if you're bringing in data scientists that are not life sciences trained, keep them close to the scientists, to the clinicians, to the people that are doing the work. The most valuable solutions that we develop are always in collaboration with the leaders in a company, with the scientists, whether they're wet lab scientists or whatever, clinicians. The best solutions are when you combine the subject matter expertise of those that are closest to the biology and medicine with the data science. Just applying data science sort of blind doesn't typically produce the best outcome. So keep that in mind. I'll say the other thing I see is that for biomedical engineers or biologists who found pharma companies or medtech companies, if they're not sort of digitally native, they can be uncomfortable in talking with the data science team. I would say resist the urge to sort of, throw the data scientists into a closet and ignore them. You've really got to work on bridging that divide and speaking a common language. It's incredibly important. Plan for the data science lifecycle. So McKinsey has a really good article. You could go Google for it on integrated evidence generation. And it's this idea that you are never done capturing data. So there has been an idea that that we've heard that you run clinical trials, especially in the med tech space. You run a trial, you get your approval, and you're done. You're done with trials, you're done with data. You are not done. The payers want to see evidence. They want to see how the real world is doing. You need to continue to develop your digital assets. Hardware can become commoditized over time. And so your digital assets are what can create a moat for you. They're going to let you continue to change behavior, drive up outcomes, find more partnerships, keep negotiating on those payer reimbursements. And so what this integrated evidence generation about is really understanding that your whole team needs access to data. So democratize access to it, track all of it, all trials, all sites, all real world data, make sure it's flowing in to a platform so that it's secure, it's version controlled, it can be visualized and accessed in a way that each team needs in their own way. And then what I won't even go into much detail today, but your data scientists also need very specialized tooling. So as early days when they're exploring data, doing proof of concept work, trying to figure out what signals in the data, they can work often in Jupyter notebooks. But as you find signal, as you start planning a path to production, you really need sophisticated tooling that can track the versioning of your models, experiment tracking, what worked, what didn't, the feature stores. It's a lot of feature engineering that happens on biological and medical data. You want that stored, version controlled, safe, manage the production deployments. Model monitoring is also coming under the purview of the FDA. So not many companies have truly implemented model monitoring. It sounds simple, but it's pretty complex, but that is going to be in your future if you are sending models out into the production world. And then model retraining never goes away. I'll tell you one brief story on model monitoring. Epic had sepsis detecting models deployed in many of their instances, and they were running along quite well at generating risk alerts for patients who looked like they were beginning to show higher risk for sepsis and needed interventions. COVID happened. And of course, those models, the sepsis models, had never seen COVID patients. And so the data profiles of those patients was dramatically different. And so they started flagging sepsis warnings all over the place. Well, that's doing harm because guess what? Everyone started ignoring all the sepsis alerts, which means the patients who truly had sepsis got lost in all the false positive signal. So that is why we need model monitoring. We need data scientists. We need people alerted right away when there's data drift, when the real world environment has started to change away from the training world. Okay, Dwayne, we moved fast. That was a lot, but thank you.
Yeah, Angela, I was going to say one thing on the payers perspective. You brought that up about payers and they want to see clinical data as well. We're not going to get into reimbursement, right? Obviously, but I did want to plug a previous Galen data webinar series. I can't remember the exact number or when it was, but Tom Hughes from LabCorp did a Galen data webinar series on reimbursement, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I have a CPT code, I'm good to go, I got reimbursement, and that's not the case. And so if you're curious and more information on that, there is a previous webinar series, and we'll have to dig up the number, but it's probably somewhere on Galen's website.
Awesome. No, reimbursement is not done just because you get an approval. That's right.
So Angela, there were a couple questions that came in before the webinar. Is there anything else you wanted to add before I dive into a few of those?
No, let's jump straight into the questions.
Okay, so let me see here. Okay, AI and machine learning need large amounts of data to be useful / provide insights. Can smaller medtech companies compete effectively in this area? Is there scope for data sharing to increase the amount of available data?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. And this is one we hear a lot, that people say, we only have, so far, we only have 50 or 100 patients' data from preliminary trials. Can you do anything with it? So yes, I mean, I think when you work with a team that's skilled in this space, we absolutely, you may not get a model that's going to get all the way through a regulatory approval and in production, but you can do a lot to establish early signal, and that early signal can really drive proof of concept work that can help you with fundraising, right? So I would think about how can your data science roadmap support the evolution of your company, not just sort of a, binary of, well, are we going to get there or are we not, but how can it push you along the roadmap? I think the whole data sharing discussion is an interesting one. I would say there's a lot of providers now that are bringing real world data assets to market for license. So Truveta is one that's got maybe 100 hospitals as collaborating and sharing data in that consortium. Nashville Biosciences has commercialized Vanderbilt University's data assets. The Biobank out of the UK is another one. And these are rich data sets, right? They can include biosensor data, imaging, sequencing, drugs, treatments, outcomes, all kinds of information. What I think is unique about the medtech space, though, and I just met with one last week, if you have a truly novel device that has never been used before, you are the only producer of the signal for what you need. But just because you have small data sets, I would consider that's valuable. A unique data set is incredibly good. I would say also figure out, are there ways you can partner in the clinical trial space to drive some revenue and keep increasing your data set. So hopefully that helps, Dwayne.
Yeah, that's great. Also, we keep bringing up the clinical trial space. It's obviously not the size of the U.S. healthcare system. I get that, but for people who don't know, the clinical trial space is massive globally. You could just look at the CROs that are in that space and kind of get a feel for that, and just look at their annual revenue. And most of it's coming from the clinical trials. So another question we got, and this is back to that payers discussion, is how are payers adjusting to the change in technology?
Yeah, the payers. So I started meeting with a team from Humana 3 years ago talking about predictive analytics and how they can inform treatment decisions. So the payers are on top of this. They are really watching. They want to see efficacy. They want to see business cases that are driving improved outcomes, lower rates of adverse events that correlate to cost. I think Medicare Advantage is a really interesting case for that because it is value-based care. And then the numbers of people enrolling into Medicare Advantage keeps going up every year. So this is a plan that's not going away. And so those companies that are offering Medicare Advantage plans are really incentivized to be innovative in their thinking, to find ways to take better care of their populations and invest in tooling. So you've got the Medicare population that's looking at evidence-based outcomes. You've got the corporate funded payer plans, and they're looking, for the working age market, they are looking for evidence of, is this, improving the mental health of my plan participants? Is it driving up productivity for my employees? Is it overall bringing down adverse events? So I think in the payer space, they are open. It is absolutely the name of the game is proving, showing the evidence, tying into a business case. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other discussions I've had, but that's been a lot. That's been a lot of them. Yeah, well, I guess I'll say one more thing here, Dwayne. I've heard of some companies lately, especially digital health applications, that are doing something that I haven't heard of before. They have some hospitals that they know, they are confident they can bring value to hospitals, so they can lower, especially for value-based care, DRG-based billing, they can lower ER visits and hospital readmissions, but hospital budgets are always come under a lot of scrutiny. So they are considering going to an at-risk model. So I will give you a low cost or free instance of my software. We will run it for a year, and then we will split the savings. And I think that, pretty interesting models that are beginning to emerge.
Yeah, really interesting. That does bring up a good point of anytime product adoption and people are using new technology, you have to sometimes get creative with some of those early commercialization models to get some of these pilot companies or customers on board with you. So I love that you brought that up. We did have one question come in, Angela, and it says, we are building a device that incorporates several competitors' functions. Could we start using their data to start building models before our device is built, if possible to attain it for free? Oh no, if possible to obtain it for a fee.
I think you can always have discussions. That's a tricky one, because you're probably not going to want to let these competitors know that you're doing what you're doing. But sometimes those data sets you can get access to, you have to sort of figure out how they're captured. Can you buy the devices? If you buy them and then you're able to use them in some way, then that's data sets that you can use. You can also run trials using competitors' devices. I mean, once they're on the market, anyone who is lawfully prescribed them can use these. So I think that's a pretty interesting, it's a good way to establish a proof of concept to support a fundraising story.
Awesome. So that's all the questions, Angela. We do have up on the slide here the contact information for Mercury data. We also have the contact information for Galen data as well. And so with that being said, Angela, thanks so much for your time today. I personally found the presentation fascinating and really enjoyed kind of the overview and of the MedTech space and where it's going. Obviously, I'm at a company called Project MedTech, so I'm inherently biased as well on the MedTech space, overtaking the BioTech space. But I found it fascinating, and how data plays a role in this is just really cool and oftentimes overlooked in different aspects than maybe what we all think. So really appreciated your time today. Thanks so much. And everyone who is still listening in and in attendance, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Dwayne. It was a pleasure. And anyone, just feel free to reach out to me either at this email or on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to learn about new companies.
Awesome. Thank you.